morning and welcome to Rising. It is a lovely, chilly Thursday morning here in the nation's capital, although I think it's supposed to warm up a little bit later and over the weekend. Won't that be nice?
It is. We are lucky to live in D.C. where spring comes early, and Poxitani Phil seems to agree, so I'm looking forward to it.
Although it's always very chilly in the studio, as you like to point out.
I do like to point that out. I'm gonna start bringing a shawl to work like Mika Brzezinski. She knows what's up.
And then maybe Joe Biden will be watching. You know, he loves to watch Morning Joe. Maybe it's the shawl that brings him in.
Maybe it's the shawl. Well, in today's news, we've got a lot for you. Remember yesterday, Robby, when you said it was going to be a problem for Biden if he keeps having these senior moments, well, he did it again. Fox News' Jackie Heinrich reports that at two fundraising events last night, Biden said German Chancellor Helmut Kohl was with him on his first foreign trip as president. Again, Angela Merkel was German Chancellor at the time, and Kohl had died in 2017. Fox News' Peter Doocy asked White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre about the first incident where Biden confused current French President Emmanuel Macron with the deceased former French President Francois Mitterrand. Let's take a look.
How is President Biden ever going to convince the 3/4 of voters who are worried about his physical and mental health that he is okay, even though in Las Vegas he told a story about recently talking to a French president who died in 1996?
I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole with you,
What?
sir.
What is
We're
the
going to
rabbit
go.
hole?
Go ahead.
He said
go
he
ahead.
talked to Mitterrand.
Go ahead. You saw the president in Vegas, in California. You've seen the president in South Carolina. You saw him in Michigan. I'll just leave it there. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, meanwhile, Hillary Clinton recently sat down for an interview with MSNBC to tackle a host of subjects, and she addressed Tucker Carlson's recent visit to Moscow to interview Vladimir Putin. Clinton accused Carlson of being a, quote, useful idiot for the Kremlin. Let's watch.
I mean, he's like a puppy dog. You know, he somehow has, after having been fired from so many outlets in the United States, I would not be surprised if he emerges with a contract with an outlet, because he is a useful idiot. He says things that are not true. He parrots Vladimir Putin's pack of lies about Ukraine. So I don't see why Putin wouldn't give him an interview, because through him, he can, continue to lie about what his, objectives are in Ukraine and what he expects to see happen. It's really quite sad that not just somebody like Tucker Carlson, who has, as I said, been fired so many times because he seems unable to, correlate his reporting with the truth, but also because it's a sign that there are people in this country right now who are like a fifth column for Vladimir Putin. And why? I don't know. I mean, why are certain Republicans throwing their lot in? Why are, other Americans basically believing Putin? Why did
Nancy Pelosi also having a bad time. The former House Speaker seemed visibly angry as she was confronted by angry pro-Palestinian protesters once again, this time in the halls of a congressional office building. Let's take a look.
Don't call us Russian apologists or Chinese apologists. You are an Israel apologist. You are an Israel apologist.
Voting yes or no?
Are you going to vote no on the money? Are you going to vote no on the money?
We
Are you
saw
going to
that
vote
you
no?
get $1 million
Are you going to vote no on the money?
Congratulations on making money on it.
We're not.
Russian sponsored.
We're
not from China.
We don't have headquarters in China. Our headquarters is right here in the United States, and we don't want you giving any more money to Israel.
Later, Pelosi made a robust defense of Obamacare, saying it didn't, quote, suck.
Donald Trump has said Obamacare sucks. Now, it has provided health care. It doesn't suck. It provides health insurance and care for tens of millions of people who didn't have it, and for over 150 million people who might have a pre-existing medical condition.
And the Democratic shadow primary just lost its first challenger. The AP reports that Marianne Williamson has dropped out of the race, leaving just Biden and Congressman Dean Phillips to duke it out for the nomination. And I guess Cenk Uygur is also in the mix as well. The kind of chaos, I think, of that lineup of clips really does speak to, I think, the fragmented American political moment at the time. You have Nancy Pelosi defending against a volley of criticisms, not just about Israel-Palestine, but you could also hear in that clip criticisms about how much money her stock portfolio is making and her history of resistance to legislation that would make it less easy for elected officials to do insider trading and have greater returns than the average investor off of the stock market, which is an obvious concern and conflict of interest to people. Of course, Israel-Palestine is an issue that is not just flagging Nancy Pelosi, but the Biden administration and the entire Democratic Party is trying to figure out what to do about the fact that so many voters, especially in crucial states like Michigan, see this as a red line of sorts, and that they are making it increasingly ambiguous, the differences between Republicans and Democrats. We didn't talk about this just now, but Joe Biden came under hot fire for some remarks about abortion recently. That's seen as a tentpole issue that's going to keep the Democratic coalition together. And if Biden wins, it will likely be because of that issue. But he said, I believe it was last night or the night before, I'm a Catholic. I don't want to see abortion on demand, but of course I was upset with the Dobbs decision. Well, abortion on demand is of course language that anti-choice advocates use for their position, and people are like, this is the one thing that's going to save your campaign, and you can't even give a full-throated defense of abortion. I mean, what is going on here?
Well, and again, we have the same issue where he's misremembering his various European heads of state. Again, another example, and this is starting to call to mind, I'm sorry to keep saying this, again, elderly people we've known in our lives, when they start getting dates and people confused in this exact way. I'm not trying to diagnose the man remotely, but this is starting to be telltale signs of a concerning trajectory in his ability to recall basic facts and anecdotes. I don't know why Karine Jean-Pierre got so mad at Ducey for asking a totally fair question about now his repeated habit of misremembering these things. Her answer was, well, you've seen him in all these places. I don't even know what that means. Well, yes, we've seen him all over the place, and we've seen him say a lot of things that make absolutely no sense. What are you talking about? He
stood up and did sentences in the right order at this one location, so you shouldn't have any questions about the GAFFES.
The question is he over time? Is the percentage of times where he doesn't really know what he's talking about and he's confused and disoriented and can't finish his sentences and is mumbling and is getting people's names wrong, is that increasing over time? And are they going to respond to that by keeping him, more locked up in the basement, et cetera, as he's supposed to be doing this campaign? He's not doing the Super Bowl interview, as we discussed, for second year in a row. I think they're afraid to risk having the American people see what bad shape he's actually in. That's what it seems like.
Karine Jean-Pierre's answer, it makes her look weak, and it makes the campaign and the administration look vulnerable. And remember, there was an off-ramp for all of this. We knew a year ago that the American public didn't want another Biden-Trump mashup. We knew that we have two candidates with historically low polling. We've known since 81 years ago that Joe Biden was going to be 80 in his 80s today for this election. And there was an opportunity to have a real primary, and there was an opportunity to give the other people running in this race a real shot. Even if the Democratic Party didn't want to open that door, mainstream left-leaning news, MSNBC, CNN, could have given opportunities to folks like Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson to have the platform to at least let the voters see what the options were. And now we're in a situation where you can see why the Democratic Party would want to double down. And it is, I think, a kind of not poetic justice, but there's something kind of karmic about being at a moment where the Democratic Party is in an obvious crisis because of these questions about Joe Biden's stamina, and having now these opponents of his that offered some degree of promise about a different kind of politics, a more youthful kind of politics, a kind of politics that was more in line with what the American people want, advancing policies like Medicare for all. I think Marianne Williamson is the last Medicare for all candidate standing, someone who advocated for a peace department instead of a war department, dropping out of the race at this juncture. It says really, I think, negative and dispiriting things about the real choices that are presented to the American people.
Dean Phillips, I saw, tweeted yesterday, I think, those clips of Biden stumbling through his words, and he quote tweets it saying, "Look, I love Joe Biden. I campaigned for him. I supported him. I support his policies. But look at this. People are going to be concerned about this, and that's why I'm running." And I think it's hard to disagree with the rationale of that. Before we go, we should turn to Hillary Clinton giving those remarks. And I'm sorry. I would like it for a former U.S. government official. She was the Secretary of State. She was a U.S. Senator at a time where someone, at least in the European Union, has raised the prospect of sanctioning Tucker Carlson. I've seen some subsequent others in the European Union saying they're not going to take action, which good, they should not. Great. Maybe this is a lone dissenting voice who said something crazy. Fine. But I would rather have this former American U.S. government diplomat criticize the European Union for trying to take action that violates free speech and due process against an American citizen engaged in journalism in Europe. But of course, all she wants to do is criticize Tucker himself before we've even seen the interview.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Another part of that interview, she gets into the campus speech questions that are being debated. She is on faculty or just teaching a class at Columbia University right now, which has been the site of a lot of pro-Palestine protests and a lot of crackdowns from the administration on protest groups. There was a student that was involved in that skunk chemical attack a couple of weeks ago, who was attacked by former members of the IDF on campus. Of course, that did not get the same kind of response that some of the peaceful protests, pro-Palestinian protests have gotten. And so she was asked about that in this interview, and perhaps unsurprisingly had a take that, sure, First Amendment speech, you got to do First Amendment. But on a college campus, it has to be done in a certain way. And if you don't have the permit and you don't follow the rules, then basically it justifies shutting down speech, which of course incentivizes a paradigm where you come up with rules that people are going to violate so you can justify not enabling them to protest. And the reason she takes that position is because, of course, she's being protested on campus for any number of reasons.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all to hear that from her.
Right.
Again, former head of the State Department, you would expect maybe a more full-throated defense of these quintessential American values.
The democracies we've been protecting all over the world with all of our guns and bombs.
Unfortunately, no. After more Rising right after this, please stay with us.